Hi everyone! Everyone needs a little bit of inspiration every now and again, so now we're going to take a look at some past examples of really good sports assignments that have been turned in this class. Sports can be a little bit tricky sometimes, and really just a really early lesson here is shoot to your strengths. I said this in the feedback for your pitches for a lot of you, but remember to keep in mind the gear that you're shooting on and the situation that you're going to be shooting. For some of you, if you are shooting on an SLR, that is going to mean that you have a little bit more of a range in terms of what is going on that you can shoot. If you are shooting on a smartphone, you can get really, really good shots, but keep in mind when we talked about gear a couple weeks ago, that's going to be coming into play here, right? So if you're shooting on a smartphone or a non-DSLR camera, you're not going to be able to get as far away, so the zoom is sort of out of it, as well as the lighting, right? So darker pictures, darker settings are not going to translate very well. So if you want to shoot a, for example, soccer game, if you are using a smartphone, you're not going to want to spend a lot of time shooting out into the field and getting blurry pictures of soccer players from far away because the lighting isn't going to be good and the zoom is pretty bad. What you're going to want to do is get close-up shots, get shots that are close to the close to you, right? So you want to pay attention to the action when it's near the sidelines, or better yet, pay attention to the coaches, the crowd, etc. Let's start off with roller derby. This is one that was shot on a smartphone, and it looks really, really good. We start off with a detail shot of someone lacing up their skate. Now, one thing that I don't love about this is the flash. I think it ultimately would have been better if the flash was off, but the photographer of this told me that the lighting in here was pretty bad, and so they kind of had to use flash. Here is the people getting themselves ready, markering up their numbers on their arms. Now we've got some action itself of the roller action. I don't really exactly know how roller derby works, but here is the action itself. We get more of an action shot of someone falling on the ground. Now you can sort of see where the camera was trying to compensate for the lighting here. This is a good shot for an example for noise. If you notice anywhere there's lots of dark, so notice on the woman on the right's t-shirt, the guy in the background shirt, you can notice it almost looks like little dots of pink everywhere. That is the camera's sensor trying to compensate for the darkness in the shot. And then finally a close-up shot of a woman putting ice on her head. I'm assuming she fell down and hurt herself. That I think is the same woman from the previous photo. But this is a really nice put-together photo package because it varies up distances and it does a really good job of using details and close shots effectively. Now we have a soccer game. So just as a heads up, this is a soccer game that was shot on a nicer SLR. I had a student who was really into photography who had a really good camera who was shooting this. And so this is going to look really nice, but if you have a smartphone, your mileage may not quite go this far. So we have paying attention before the game. We got the lineup before the game when people were just lined up to start to play. Moving into the action shot, we have sort of sliding into the ball here. Another good piece of action as it was close to the photographer on the sidelines. Even then, even using a good SLR, you're not trying to shoot everything at a super huge distance with a zoom. You're trying to pay attention to what's close to you so you can get detailed expression and detailed action. Notice this is using a pretty high speed on the shutter, so it looks like the action is frozen in place. Paying attention to the crowd, we get our guy who's blowing on a vuvuzela. There's always got to be at least somebody with a vuvuzela, I suppose. And then following the action of the story, we have the team once they've won. They're celebrating with the crowd. I love the guy pointing from the right. I love the facial expressions on everybody's face. I think that works really, really well. And to me, it tells the story, right? If you look at this picture, there's no misunderstanding if the team won or lost. Let's look at swimming. This is another one that was shot on an SLR. And swimming can be a little bit tricky because the temptation would be to have lots of pictures of people in a pool. But those don't necessarily make the most interesting shots all the time. So you end up varying the shots up and waiting for good moments, right? So this is a great moment because you get both of the swimmers in the same field of view and they almost look symmetrical to each other. I really love the lighting in this shot. The fact that the sun has sort of started to go down at this point and you get the really great shadows. You get the sort of light reflecting off of the water, makes for a really clean background. I love that this is paying attention to not just the swimmers themselves, but the reactions of the rest of the team and the fans. So the facial expressions and the way that you can see their eyes focusing is a really, really great shot. And then, of course, we are going to get at least a couple of photos of swimmers, right? So we don't have to always focus on the other things. This is a really good example of really high-speed shutter usage. The water droplets seem frozen in the air, so this is with a high-speed shutter. And then finally, we get our crowd reaction, everyone cheering. I love that you can see the stopwatch in the guy's hand. Everyone's yelling. Everyone's got their arms in the air. Looks like a good photo story. And then finally, a training exercise. This is a photo story that's a little bit different than some of the others, which were at live sporting events or people actually doing sort of live sports. This one is about a guy who was training for an amateur weightlifting tournament. And so he was getting himself ready and training, and it worked through his entire training regimen almost as a feature story. And so it starts here with all of the stuff he takes on a regular basis, with his powders and such stacked up on top of the fridge and on top of his apartment. He's got the stuff, all the vitamins and supplements inside of his kitchen cabinets there. I really, really like this as an opening shot. This, as it was explained in the captions for it, is a scale that he has to use in order to weigh out everything he has to take every morning. We then get our action shots. Notice this is shot from a low angle to make it look even more epic and important. I love the facial expressions. Of course, you're going to get really great facial expressions with something like this. Tying it together in the form of an anecdote, those two photos work together to show the process of him deadlifting this weight. Again, shot low to make it seem even more epic. And then finally, we end our story with him eating. The caption explains that one of the things he has to do is just eat a whole lot of calories in a day in order to put on muscle mass. And so he has to force himself to eat even if he doesn't really want to eat, which this picture, I think, sums up really well on this sort of just depressed look on his face as he eats more green beans and quinoa and rice and beans and stuff. So this is a really good example of, hey, if you're doing a feature-style profile here, if you're not necessarily going to shoot a live sporting event, you can still put together a really interesting series of photos into a story. And with that, I really look forward to seeing what you have.